Civil rights icon Andrew Young Jr. is reflecting on the global protests against racism and police brutality in the wake of George Floyd's death. Young, a pastor, worked with Dr. Martin Luther King at the Southern Christian Leadership Congress. He was integral in the creation of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Under President Jimmy Carter, he became the first African-American ambassador of the U.S. to the United Nations. As mayor of Atlanta, he helped bring the Olympics to the city in 1996. Ambassador Young sat down with CBS News' Pamela Falk about how he sees racism in the world today and why he believes today's protests are having an impact.
It all comes back to these little cell phones. You know, I say that when I was working with Martin Luther King, we hardly had telephones in most of the residences where we stayed.
We've both lived through the onset of smartphones, but they've been around for a little while. And since the death of George Floyd, these protests have taken off in a way that they hadn't for so long, and calling for racial
that's the
equality.
difference.
So why?
The difference was that we had to watch it. We watched the death of George Floyd, and it has the same impact. Everybody remembers the little girl, the nude girl walking down the road in Vietnam crying. That image ended the war in Vietnam. And George Floyd's death, with the cold, callous way that it took place, with other officers watching, and with people saying, get off him, around, I think it was one of those moments that touched the heart of the planet. And life is not supposed to be that way.
You work so closely with Dr. King. Does his belief in nonviolence and his preaching of civil disobedience still hold today? Is it an effective message? There's a lot of anger out there. What do you think?
Well, I think that the anger is not productive. One of the things that my father taught me at 4 years old was, don't ever lose your temper in a fight. Don't get mad, get smart. I happened to grow up in New Orleans with the Nazi Party headquarters 50 yards from where I was born. And he explained to me that white supremacy is a sickness. And you don't get angry with sick people. You kind of help them with their sickness. And you don't, you just don't ever lose your temper in a fight. If you lose your temper in a fight, you lose the fight. And I guess that was one of the reasons why you never saw, I don't think I ever saw Martin Luther King get angry.
Is the U.S. still capable of being a global leader? What's your message, having been the U.S. ambassador to the UN?
Well, the United Nations, the World Health Organization, and this whole network of globalization came out of the Second World War. And it was a time when America wanted to be a leader. And America had learned from the First World War that you cannot get along unless we're somehow working toward a global unity. Americans now forget that one of the reasons why we were able to take the leadership was that we had won the war. But we also had realized that we were the ones who had the most. And if we were going to let the rest of the world catch up, we had to pay a little more. So we helped Japan, we helped Germany, we helped England, we helped friends and foe alike. One thing that the Trump administration has not realized yet, that this virus has taught us, that this little thing that we can't see and don't know much about has reminded us that this is one world and that there's no escaping it. We can't take many people to the moon, and somehow this little virus has gotten to everywhere with everybody, and it has reminded us that we are one family, and I think under God, and that it requires leadership from somebody.
Do you think it's time for the U.S. administration to return and reinvest in multilateralism?
No,
in the UN?
I think that it's not going to be us investing in multilateralism. I think that there are others who are doing better than we are. And when we recover from this virus with 40 million people out of work, we're going to need help from our trading partners around the world, and that help, well, everybody's going to need help. And so we're going to have to renegotiate a new world order. And I think that the present president doesn't think in those terms.
Thank you for talking with us today about global racism and world politics. I'm Pamela Falk for CBS News in New York. Thank you.